Okay. Well, may I just begin by saying, as well as has been said by others, thank you to the staff. I don't think I probably have the best window into the length and the extent of these negotiations that went on, and I just want to thank them. And I'll come back to them in a moment, just in terms of their effort and their integrity. But something was said earlier on by, I think it was one of the deputants or one of the speakers, that just said, you know, we're trying to, I think it was maybe Councillor Shiner that said it a moment or two ago, we're moving a transit plan forward in partnership with the other governments. And that is certainly one of the main things that I thought I was sent here to do. And it starts with working well with the other governments. And that doesn't mean you concede to their points. It just means you sit down and in a business-like way, you negotiate. And let's be frank, a lot of the issues that are being dealt with in this term sheet, whether we think the outcome was exactly as we would have had it or not, and the result of any negotiation usually is you didn't get everything you wanted, these are some issues that have been around for years, in some cases decades. I remember going up with Mel Lastman to see Mike Harris, and I was kind of there. I'm not sure whether I was the referee or exactly what I was, but I sort of knew them both. And I would go to these meetings, and I remember we came away twice with loans for $100 million rather. And you know, this was deemed to be a great victory. And when you think back on it now, and I think in fact one of those loans, they said we actually had to pay it back when I first came here. So it just shows you no good deed goes unpunished. That I showed up here and they said, well, there's this loan you have to repay now that have been around all those years. But if you sort of think about it, what kind of an answer was that? I mean, in terms of actually addressing the need the city had at that time, back in 2000 and whenever it was, to get its finances in order. So I think what we've done here is we've actually now started to deal with some of those issues, whether it's the grade separations or the operating costs. And this is where I wanted to come back and make reference to the staff again. I think people should think very carefully about this when this gets written up on the operating cost side, and think about what the city manager said. If the provincial government at some point in the recent past, especially just before one of their elections, had decided that they were going to embark on a new policy that said they were going to start to pick up the operating costs of transit systems, first of all, would they have done it just in Toronto? I don't think so. You know, if they were going to do it at all in all of the cities or any city, would they have made a huge deal out of this and sort of said, my God, we're coming back after all these years? Councillor Perks made reference to it. After all these years post-1998, we're coming back into the business of supporting operating costs for transit. But I don't know. There's been this discussion that's gone on long before I was here about whether they were responsible or not responsible, whether they agreed or hadn't agreed, and our own city manager and our solicitors say it was unclear. So now we have forged a deal that says we're going to pick up those operating costs, and that's clear going forward. They said that was pretty clear in their budget last spring. But in return for that, as Councillor Crawford, I think it was, just said, we are getting billions of dollars invested in transit from that government and from the other government in Ottawa. And I don't want to leave them out of this. Just this afternoon, they announced that they're going to be investing $25.3 billion over the next 11 years in transit. And if you work that out, we're going to be getting quite a lot of money. Now, there's a lot of things to be paid for out of that money, because we have a lot of projects that have been accumulating for years with no thought as to how we might pay for them. And I'm trying, working with these other governments and the good relationship we have with them, to change that. And we're going to have a realistic, open and frank and honest discussion about revenue enhancements in a very short period of time. And it's something that I'm looking forward to as well. But I just want to say that I, throughout, have never questioned in fact, I have problems with anybody who suggests any lack of integrity on the part of our staff just because they took a position about what went on at some point in time or another. These kinds of things can be subject to interpretation. I get that. Documents can be unclear as hard as the lawyers work. Sometimes, as we all know, people draft up documents and make them deliberately unclear because nobody really wants to deal with it at that time. And so now we have dealt with it, and this represents a huge step forward in terms of an agreed-upon template that we can use going forward, which I think will be collaborative in nature. I think it will be clearer for the future as to who is going to do what. These are things that have been bedeviling the city and the province for a long time. And the bottom line, I think, is best to set out in the chart that's on page 15 of this report, where it says that the bottom line, when you take everything into account, is that we're going to be paying 15%. When you add in operating costs and capital costs all together, we're going to be paying 15%. First of all, that seems to be lower based on the table just above than we've paid historically, but forget about that. Let's just ask ourselves the question, does asking the City of Toronto residents to pay 15% of the combined capital and operating costs seem like a fair number? Would I rather 10? Sure. But 15, does it just sound like a number that maybe is fair given our limited ability, somewhat limited ability to raise money? I believe it does. But the most important thing about this is that this allows us to get on with doing what I think we were all sent to do here, not just me. We were sent here. Some people have been here for years and years, and we have not, notwithstanding the comments earlier on, we have not. Councillor Carroll said we are not in a logjam on transit. We are, or we have been. And now we're breaking that, and we're going to get on with doing a big, extensive plan and put it into action and put it into service. So I thank you for your indulgence of a few seconds, and I think unless there's anybody else who wants to speak, we're ready to move to deal with the motions and deal with the